Welcome back to another episode of the History of Fan Anime. I'm your host, William Chow, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about our favorite video games across different consoles and any special memories that we have about these different consoles when we owned them. And again, this started from a conversation I had at work, and we just started talking about our how we grew up with video games and what video games were really significant to us over all the different consoles that we had. So I want to go through my sort of history of video games and consoles and that kind of stuff, and some stories about them. And and then basically, if you like, you can put your stories about these various different games. Do you agree with some of the games that are on the list? Do you also have a similar story? Put that in the comments below, and that'd be great. Before we begin, don't forget to go down below, click like, and click subscribe. But about 60% of you are already subscribed, and I really appreciate that. And again, hopefully the rest of you, I hope I've earned your subscription, and you go hit that red button, subscribe, and also maybe click that notification bell, because obviously YouTube is starting to get better on recommending my videos now. But for the mass majority, you won't know when I release videos until you get that notification ring. All right. I'm going to pull up the list of popular video games, and then I'm going to sort of go through them, as well as add my own stories and my own games as well. So you do that in the comments below for that too. All right. So without further delay, let's begin. Now, to continue with my current list of videos and game consoles and that kind of stuff, I just wanted to sort of remember a few more games that on the Apple II. And the next one I sort of remember that I spent a heck of a lot of time on was Guadalcanal. Now, again, I was really getting into a lot of these SSI games, and I said there's more games like strategy games like is it North Atlantic 86 is another one that comes to mind. But the Guadalcanal was really good for me because I was really fascinated with the whole Pacific War and then the entire theater, and so this one was one of the closest games they had for this. And I mean, here the resolution on the graphics on this game was like just like literally low res. I mean, it was literally low res graphics used in this thing, but and it's mostly text simulation. But what was really cool about this is that when we got it all broken down and everything like that, I managed to get into it, and I managed to figure out all the information. It was stored in a text file. So basically, again, this is a Pacific Theater, and so I went through and I used the program and variables and figured out how and what the variables meant, right? So I got into the file and made alterations to the file so that it changed the strength and the number of vessels. So again, as we know, it's a war of basically warships and aircraft carriers carrying different things like this, right? So the text file contains information like the name of the vessel. So let's say the USS Enterprise. It contains how many aircraft does it carry, and of which ones, right? It contains how many main batteries does it have, subsequent batteries, the sort of the defensive hit point value and all this other stuff that's all listed, right? So I altered this thing so that basically the American task forces were like double the amount of size in terms of number of battleships, destroyers and that kind of stuff. So again, it's a larger surface force available. I kept the aircraft carriers roughly about the same. So they still had like 5 main aircraft carriers. But the difference is that now these aircraft carriers has about as much like surface battle power as a battleship. These aircraft carriers carried like 100 planes each, instead of like 25 Wildcats, 25 torpedo bombers and 25 bomb carriers, right? For example, like the Dauntlesses. And so, and of course, you played enough times that I knew where the Japanese task force were. So this is one of those type of things where you go to it and you just you go, okay, I know where they're going to be, so I'm going to send my surface force to meet them. So basically, so the five sort of Japanese carriers, which are pretty normal. They end up meeting up with the battleship fleet, and of course the aircraft carrier fleet. I send off enough planes and that kind of stuff, and keep the aircraft and keep the my task force relatively close, so I'm able to attack them with all the airplanes. And of course now I've got way more fighter aircraft too. So instead of needing to split my aircraft to 12 or whatever. I still have literally a full squadron of 25 wildcats able to intercept all the the Japanese bombers and that kind of stuff as they come. So it's just I know these situations where during my combat phase, the Japanese are just getting shredded on both on surface combat, and just bombed the Kingdom Come with my, and of course when they launched their aircraft as a counterattack or whatever, my fighter, they can't get past the fighter screens. So it's just again, just reading the numbers, or the text screen is just so satisfying to me on how whacked this thing. But again, not for most people, since simulations are not a really big thing. But that was one of the fun things I always loved doing on the Apple II. Okay, so the next computer system I sort of bought, and I remember when I bought it too, is I remember I bought it from a police auction over at the Killarney Community Center, and it was a Commodore VIC-20, and so again, most of my games and that kind of stuff I played was all on the Apple II, and I hated the Commodore platform, but I know for the Commodore VIC-20, I specifically bought this one. It cost me like $40 at the time. And the one thing I wanted to get for that one was the game Omega Race, and it was the only game I knew that I couldn't get on any other system. And again, because I was a bit of a fan of asteroids, and and this sort of variation was really cool. So I decided to pick the system just for this one game, and so I bought this and I kept this just for that. And so this is the only one game I ever bought it for, and I kept it for this particular reason. And so for this system, it was all about Omega Race. Now the next console that I picked up was the Sega Genesis, and I remember I picked this one up over the Super Nintendo because at the time there was more games and less restrictions on this particular unit than it was on the others. Sure. I mean, like most people, we play the Sonics and that kind of stuff, and that was sort of our first start into the games that came out with the system. But the one really sort of memorable games that sort of came to my mind are Streets of Rage. I remember playing that one over and over again, because I liked playing the character Blaze. A really fun character to play, so I like doing. Playing that one over, and the other one I really remember one day I did was the game Columns, and I remember one night when I was playing that one, and for some reason I just got into the groove. I just stood there concentrating on the game so hard. I just kept going at it, and then as you complete each sort of thing, you go up each level. Well, I got it all the way up to level 99. And I actually wrapped the game. So it reset the game back to 0 once it went over 99. And I remember, just amazed at how I spent literally hours playing this one game, just to completion to get to that. It was just This is one of those weird, weird days where I just, I just zoned out and actually, did that, and uh, I think it was just that was one of the evenings where I think I had the guys over, and they were, I don't know, working on some fan stuff or something, and so I ended up spending most of the time playing games, at that time. But yeah, I managed to, to complete that one evening. So yeah, that's one memorable thing that happened to me. The other really big game that really, that really tripped my interest was, of course, Warsong. Okay, now again, I knew, I believe I first began knowing about this game in English under the name Warsong, and of course later on when I got the PC Engine, I realized that it is the Japanese game Langrisser, artwork done by Satoshi Ushihara. And again, the Sega Genesis version was the first one I played, and I really, really liked this one because, again, it was the first sort of, because I said I was really interested in strategy games and hex grid like kind of games. So so this one kind of really resonated with me, being also kind of like an anime-ish kind of game. So that was really, 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 really nice for me. The only other sort of really thing that I remember about this particular game that I played a lot was Mortal Kombat. And I remember when I was working at Radio Shack, the big controversy was that the Super Nintendo version had to edit some of the fatalities and that kind of stuff that was they put in the game, right? Because they had to ungorify it or something, right? So that but they didn't do that on the Sega Genesis version. And so when Mortal Kombat came out on like Monday, we called it Mortal Monday. I remember, when promoting video games and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I heavily promoted the Sega Genesis version at that particular time over the Super Nintendo version. And so it was, as I said, it was a really good and fun system. But yeah, for sure, those were the games that really, really, sparked my interest. Yeah, I remember another big game that, in terms of strategy games, was suggested by me from Garth at one of the club meetings, and he suggested I should try this game called Herzog Zwei. And yeah, so a nice real-time strategy building type game, just like the good old things like StarCraft and that kind of stuff. And it was really really cool to play that game, and in many ways, later on when we get into games like Military Madness and that kind of stuff, it sort of reminded me of that kind of idea. But this is a real time, and it's really action filled, and it can get really really hectic, especially when you play against multiple, like play against other players. It was really really a fun game to play. Really really challenging for the mind for sure. Anyway. Okay, so the next big system I picked up was the Super Nintendo. And I think like most people, I was really impressed with the amount of games that Super Nintendo was doing. Because again, the Nintendo, was really popular and had a lot of really major games that came up for the platform, especially a lot of the RPG and kind of story-based games. But for me, I never really got really heavily into a lot of the games. Sure, like I played things like of course your standards like Zelda, and I remember Chrono Trigger, and many different games like that. Sort of got into that, playing them a little bit, but I never actually really did spend lots of time on those particular games, and even all the sort of all the arcade ones that came out. I think the main one that really sticks out to mind. There's the two of them, right? The first one obviously is the Street Fighter 2. That was really important on this system because, obviously that was one of the first sort of cartridges that came out for that, and it was a really good rendition of the arcade game. It was probably really close, right? So we spent a lot of time playing that one, especially in versus mode and whatnot. And I think that, for a lot of us, we were really, really popular with that. Again, even with those type of fighting games, that kind of stuff, you know, when Mortal Kombat came out, I still preferred the Genesis version of it, and even when you got into the other sort of other sort of fighting games like Dragon Ball and whatnot and that kind of stuff, still um, you know better versions sort of came out, and that we still use this pretty much as a fighting platform, and everything was sort of gauged against Street Fighter at this particular time, right? So I think so Street Fighter was definitely really significant for us. And the other thing though was like they had a lot of good puzzle games, and I think the major ones that really stuck out in this time was Puyo Puyo, and you know, uh, although things like Tetris and that kind of stuff was really popular when Nintendo came out, but I think for some reason, the extra little bit of complexity and that sort of voices and that kind of stuff and the colors and that kind of stuff, I think a lot of people really gravitated toward Puyo Puyo. And we played it a lot, especially in competitive mode. But I remember some really interesting stories. Was that I remember I had one customer that came in the store, and he really really loved playing Puyo Puyo. His name was Jeff, and he just like me when I was playing Columns. He sometimes is just so locked in when playing Puyo Puyo. And I hope I remember when it comes in, he spent so much time playing that game. Then I later on found out that he was colorblind, and I thought that's absolutely amazing, because the fact that people you have to match up colors, and and he had a problem actually seeing colors. And so, and he plays this particular game, which which deals exactly with that. And I marveled at that, and then so I asked him about it one time, and he goes, "Oh, because because he is a bit colorblind, he doesn't pay attention to what color it is, per se that as color. What he does is when he watches it on TV, he notices the pattern that it makes on the TV screen, and he matches the pattern that the colors make on the TV. And I found this really, really interesting. And then so I looked at it more carefully, when next time he was playing it, and I realized, yes, on a standard CRT TV, the colors actually create different patterns. And so he was actually playing the game as a patterning game, and then he played by matching up the patterns that the colors make. And so I found that really very, very interesting. Anyway, so that's that's one of the Puyo Puyo stories. And I remember they released so much cool merchandise and that kind of stuff, like the slimes and all that kind of stuff. And are they and things like that for the for the game, and I thought that was really, really kind of really cool. And so that was another one, significant game. But other than that, yeah, like I said, there was a lot of so RPG games and stuff like that. Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger, Suikoden, and things like that, all in there. But I think that things like also Tactics Ogre and all that stuff. But again, I never really, really got into that sort of thing so much. And again, but there's one major thing that was really important to me about the Super Nintendo was the fact that there was just so many different games available that I had for that, and also the fact that was also one of the first systems that actually I spent like $800 at that time to buy one of those Game Doctors, and so that obviously really opened up the world of both Japanese games and English games and that kind of stuff. It all explosion of the number of games. So I think that's also lends the fact that not any one sort of game really stood out, really heavily for me on the Super Nintendo side, except as I said, literally for like I said, Street Fighter and Puyo Puyo, and those were basically ones because mirrored, things that was on the arcade per se, right? Obviously, I can get into other games like, the things like Fatal Fury and and things like Art of Fighting and that kind of stuff. But again, I know those games were available on the SNK Neo Geo type platform. So, in that case, that's what mirrored really well for those. But yeah, for the Super Nintendo, it was all about volume. Okay. I hope you had that kind of fun and a little blast from the past. And don't forget, I'll be doing more kind of episodes where I bring out some pictures and more merchandise and collectible stuff from that past era. Okay, so until next time, see you again.